Let's move on now to our national questions. Jim Heim, since 9/11, this nation has viewed terrorism as its #1 threat. Are we doing enough to protect ourselves?
Well, let's be clear. Terrorism is a horrendous thing. I was at Ground Zero on 9/11. I worked several blocks away. I was an emergency medical technician when I was younger, and I spent that day working with first responders, seeing the just atrocious results of not focusing enough on the threats. The threats are extremism. The threats are Islamic extremism in particular. No, it's not Iceland. Of course it's not Iceland. It's Islamic extremism. And again, think that we have done an awful lot in the last 6 years to erode our credibility in Islamic countries. And look, at the end of the day, we do what we need to do. But eroding our credibility and our standing in the rest of the world is not a good idea to doing things like what we need to do in Afghanistan, which is create the conditions for economic growth, to show that we have an alternative way, that liberal democracy and vibrant capitalism make sense, that is the way out for countries like Somalia and Chad and Mauritania and countries that might be tempted to slide into extremism. So we need to do more there. And no, we haven't done nearly enough here at home. Our dollars, our National Security, Department of Homeland Security dollars are allocated politically. We really bear the brunt of that. We're right next to New York City, and yet there are state fairs in Nebraska and whatnot that are being protected. We really need to be much more objective about how we allocate those dollars and start thinking about things like port security, frankly, which have been neglected in the last 7 or 8 years.
Christopher Shays.
My opponent makes claims about what I said, and he makes them up. And it's something when you don't get to rebut someone, it's difficult to make the point. But let me just start with the 9/11 Commission. I helped establish it. And Carol Maloney and I always find a Democrat to co-sponsor every major bill beyond any major caucus. We created the 9/11 Recommendations Implementation Act. That bill passed without our names. Unlikely that a Democrat would allow Nancy Pelosi, who's about as popular as George Bush. But we implemented the 9/11 Commission recommendations. And in there, we did it on a risk-based grant. That means that we might get a little less, but it should be on risk. He's just dead wrong about how we're allocating the money. He doesn't even know what this Democratic Congress passed. We have rail and bus transit security. It has a privacy and civil liberties board to protect constituents, and interoperability and intelligence information sharing that we passed, critical infrastructure, 100% inspection of air cargo and maritime cargo. This is what we passed when we passed the recommendations of the 9/11 Commission. It's another bill we passed in the first. I'm done.